Somebody's chair squeaking.
I think we're ready to get started, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining our continuing and distance education webinar and information session talking about UVM's Guaranteed Admission Program. Really happy to have you here. We're going to go over quick introductions, and we're going to talk about gap year or guaranteed admission to the University of Vermont. There's a lot of uncertainty as to what's happening in the fall in terms of what are students choosing? Is it a gap year? Is it time off? Is it part-time? Is it full-time? Is it online? Is it remote? There's so many different options for students to try to navigate and their families. And so we're going to walk through some of those options here at the University of Vermont related to the Guaranteed Admission Program and what that means. And there's also a new gap enrichment community that we'll talk about. It's a virtual enrichment community called the Catamount Enrichment Community. What is that? What does it include? And why is that a benefit to our guaranteed admission students? We do have, starting in less than a month, the fully online guaranteed admission course options for this year as well. We'll talk about some program logistics and that application process also. And our viewers on YouTube, welcome. We'll keep an eye on your questions in the chat box, so please do ask any questions there. We'll make sure to get them over to Kristen, our presenter today. If there is something that we weren't able to answer, we'll make sure to put our email address up in the chat so that you can follow up with any particular questions. This session is being recorded, and we will share the session out in an email to all folks who have RSVP'd for us today. And if by chance you don't know if you RSVP'd and you're joining us on YouTube, please do send us an email and let us know if you want to get that recording. So my name is Nicole Willier-Fenton. I am our Content Marketing Manager in the UVM's Continuing and Distance Education Department. And we have Kristen Kabashian joining us remotely as well today. Kristen, so happy to have you with us.
Happy to be here.
And Kristen works so closely with our pre-college and our guaranteed admission students, and she has an MS in College Student Development and Counseling from Northeastern University. And as I mentioned, she works very closely with our pre-college and guaranteed admission students on advising and making sure that they are successful. So we'll hear a lot more from Kristen in a moment about the logistics of the guaranteed admission program, but we just really wanted to set the stage in terms of we recognize that there are so many different articles and options for students to consider, that what a challenging time to try to figure out what is right for you as you consider pursuing your college career, and how can you make those decisions, thinking about financial decisions, thinking about time. You know, many of our students consider part-time because maybe there's work requirements or family requirements. And so how in the world can students make these decisions? This is very difficult. And just when looking quickly at some of the articles, when you look up gap year or taking a year off or guaranteed admission, you find a slew of articles that again add to that confusion. So we just wanted to recognize that it's challenging to figure this out, and one of the things that we can offer here at the University of Vermont is indeed a guarantee through our Guaranteed Admission Program. And Kristen, I wanted to ask you, many students inquire about the Guaranteed Admission Program. What are you hearing from students as to why the Guaranteed Admission Program at UVM, especially the online option that we'll talk about in a few minutes, why is that so appealing to students potentially for this fall?
Sure. Well, everybody has their own reasons, but some of the biggest concerns have been around COVID and coming to campus. Students do want to still move forward with their studies, but they don't necessarily want to commit to going away to a university or even coming to UVM if they live close by. So the online option for GAP has been very attractive to students. A lot of the students are from out of state and know that they do want to ultimately come to the university, for whatever reason did not get their application in or had maybe changed directions pretty quickly and decided UVM was where they wanted to come. So they saw the program and saw this as an opportunity to start working towards their credits without having to come to campus during this particular time that we're in, and then ultimately be able to matriculate. So they're meeting their goals, but they're just doing it a little differently. There's also a handful of students that are taking it because they have been away from school for years. They may have taken some coursework right after high school, but then decided to enter the workforce, and from there realize that they can't move forward in their career without their education. So they're coming to us because they want to ultimately get a degree, and because we offer them the option of being part-time and doing it remotely, they're still able to work part-time or full-time depending on them, take advantage of University of Vermont classes, and then ultimately work towards matriculation.
Absolutely. I think it's wonderful that we have this option because there's so many different choices that students and families are having to make for the fall that this one feels, as we mentioned, it's a guarantee. It feels a little bit of certainty amongst so much uncertainty that we're all dealing with. And so on this slide, we have information about the Guaranteed Admission Program has been around at UVM since 1993, and majority of the students matriculate in. Sometimes they choose not to, or they go to a different school. And one of the things that's really valuable about thinking about starting at UVM through the Guaranteed Admission Program is that the credits are very credible and they're very transferable. So what we're helping students do is get on their path towards their undergrad degree. Ideally, folks are also matriculating into UVM, but if that's not the choice, as you mentioned, many students have UVM in their sights, but maybe they're just not interested in coming on campus for this fall. This is a great option that then gives students many options to consider. But the majority of our students that come in through the GAP program also graduate within 4 to 6 years. And the courses that are available to students are available year-round during the academic year and in the summer months. But one of the things that I really wanted Kristen to share with us is the customized nature of the GAP program. You sit down and talk with students about what are you trying to accomplish? What do you like? So that you're building, even that first semester of those core courses, you're putting them on a path so that they can move on to their undergraduate degree. How do you do that? Maybe walk us through that process to help the students pick the right courses for them.
Sure. So it's very individualized. It starts with having a conversation, as you said. We discuss their interests, their likes, their dislikes, their strengths, their weaknesses, because ultimately we want them to be successful. We don't want to force anybody into a course that they're going to absolutely hate and not be successful in. So we have a pretty lengthy conversation. What does this look like, and obviously, when you select a major or at least a college of interest, we try to take all of that information and form a contract, which I think we'll talk about a little later, based on all of the requirements of the college and the major and all the information that we just gathered about a student's particular area of interest and strengths.
And let's talk a little bit about that contract as well. One of the things that you're seeing on this slide is the fact that there are fully online courses available to GAP students. And the really amazing thing for this fall is a 30% reduction in tuition if you choose GAP Online for this coming school year. And we'll get into the enrichment community in a moment. But when you talk about a contract, you're also, it resides in UVM's continuing and distance education department where you and I both work, but it's a contract also with one of the unit or the college that you're thinking that you might major in. Maybe walk us through, how do you help students build that contract and make those connections with some of the colleges internally at UVM?
Sure. So 90% of the students come in with an idea as to what they want, but then there's a small handful that may not necessarily know, and so we'll discuss different majors or different areas of interest, like I said before, and we'll identify a college. So if you're going into business, that's pretty straightforward. We would discuss the core requirements that the College of Business wants to see in a transfer student. And based on that, as well as all of the other information, we'll start to plot out courses. A contract typically runs about 6 classes. We have to identify 18 credits worth of coursework for a contract. And from there, we try to stay generalized so that we know if you decide to change majors, those classes will be transferable to different colleges within UVM, as well as potentially other colleges outside of UVM should you decide to go elsewhere. So as you had mentioned before, Nicole, the courses are transferable. So we try to take courses that have that general applicability. So a history class is most likely a history class anywhere, but within UVM's walls, history kind of fills the bucket of requirements in most colleges, as well as a social science. So we try to keep it general in that sense, and then I'll help the student identify what might be the best fit based on their interest and strengths. So that the contract itself will have those courses laid out, and then from there we send that to the dean's office of the college that we're trying to gain admissions, say Grossman School of Business again, and then once they approve it, then it goes to admissions, and then voila, you're a GAP student.
And we'll talk about some of those requirements to gain admission in just a moment. Again, our participants who are viewing on YouTube today, if you have any questions as you're listening to the information Kristen is presenting about the Guaranteed Admission Program, please do put some questions in the chat box and we'll be sure to keep an eye on those. So the Catamount Enrichment Community is a new effort that we are launching for the Guaranteed Admission Program this fall. There's a virtual online community, and part of that community allows students to interact with each other. Lots of videos, tutorials, resources, articles, recordings of webinars and info sessions and tips. Really a very rich resource of things that can help our guaranteed admission students really succeed. Time management, self-care, wellness, just making sure that our guaranteed admission students, whether they're on campus or whether they're taking the online GAP option, that they really feel a part of the UVM community. And so some of the things that are listed in here as part of the enrichment community are building those study skills, developing meaningful connections with other students, and engaging and making sure that GAP students, whether they're in Connecticut, they're in South Burlington, wherever they reside, that they are a part of the community and can take advantage of those resources. But the GAP program in the enrichment community also allows students to demonstrate that academic readiness, earn college credit, and then ultimately enroll in an undergrad program at UVM. The enrichment community is a new effort that I know, Kristen, that you're a part of the strategy and the planning. As things are being put in place to launch here in a couple of weeks, what are you seeing as some of the benefits of the Catamount enrichment community for our GAP students?
Sure. Well, one of the main reasons we're trying to pull this together is so students that are kind of spread out regionally can come together and connect with each other and have some shared experiences. So we're hoping that there's some interactive pieces, that the students interact with each other within the community itself, but it's also there to provide them with tools to be successful. We want students to understand some of the processes. There's an orientation to help students be prepared for online learning. There's access to tutoring resources, to application, how to apply to college. So it's really there to build their toolbox so that as they're moving forward in their program, they have sure footing, they can be successful, they know who their resources are, what their resources are, how to get in touch with people, how to find things that they need, and then it hopefully to also connect with their peers.
And that's such an important part of the college experience, is finding that community. And so we're really helping our guaranteed admission students to at least start with one community as they continue to grow in their college experience and finding additional communities also. I think one of the things that's really interesting about the guaranteed admission program, and You see this slide up here that just has a few pictures of some of the students that I've had the good fortune of writing about and sharing their stories, is that GAP students come to UVM from so many different backgrounds and so many different pathways. Would you say that there isn't really one way in to the GAP program in terms of there isn't a typical GAP student? You know, they come from all kinds of different walks of life, and their own experiences is what adds value to the program. Can you talk a little bit about just the students and how they got here that you've experienced over the last several years?
Oh, sure. And I mean, you just said it. There's no typical pathway in. We've had students that take time off and then go do amazing things. I'm looking at the photos here and knowing their backgrounds, they took time and did some really great service learning work. So they took what might feel like a traditional gap year. It probably ended up only being a gap summer, if you will, and then decided to come back to school, or took classes elsewhere and just didn't feel like they fit at the university they were attending. And oftentimes we know this, that if you're not feeling connected to the institution you're in, you don't necessarily succeed. And that can put you in a really rough space. So coming to UVM as a GAP student opens that door again for you, and hopefully you find your community here. We've had most of our students have found that they have a community here. They get involved and they feel connected, and then that feeds their success.
And also, some of these students too that and we're just even seeing on screen and or that you deal with didn't gain admission the first time around to the University of Vermont, and I know how devastating that can be to students that maybe UVM was their top choice. Can you talk about how this is an option for students when they didn't think that UVM was the choice that they could make?
Sure. Basically, as a GAP student, you're taking UVM courses. You are taking the same course that every other undergraduate at the institution is taking. So this shows if you can take the UVM classes and be successful, it proves your academic readiness, that you are engaged and you are motivated and driven to be successful in college. So the piece of paper that you had submitted right after high school may not have told the full story. So now you're starting to give more of your story, showing that you have the abilities to be a UVM student. And that really is taken into account when you apply. They look at your transcripts, they see that you are able to do above average work, and that just helps the student feel better about themselves and helps them gain admission to the university.
And so often when I speak with some of our GAP students about their experiences, they're some of the most driven students that I've ever spoken to, because they see the obstacle that maybe they thought that they couldn't overcome as a challenge, and that they very much want to prove that this is the right choice and that they're meant to be here. So it's really inspiring to see what some of our students set out to do to prove that this is the university that they want to be a part of. So let's talk a little bit about, Kristen, and maybe just go over some of the points here. There are, and this goes back to the contract that you were talking about before, there are things that students need to kind of check off that list to then gain admission into UVM. Can you walk us through some of these points?
Sure. So as a GAP student, you have the ability to take part-time coursework. So if you only have the ability to take one class this particular semester, you absolutely have the flexibility to do that. Most students tend to take 3 classes a semester, which is 9 credits. But you can be a full-time student, which would be 4 classes a semester, 12 credits, or you can take anything in between the 1 to 12 credit range to be part-time. So it does offer students flexibility because you may be working, it just may not fit with your schedule. There's a variety of reasons why you may choose to be full or part-time. But as we said earlier, the contract does require us to identify a minimum of 18 credits worth of coursework, and students must maintain a 2.8 GPA or higher to have the contract be fulfilled. So by completing the identified 18 credits worth of courses and having that 2.8 GPA, as long as you finish it within a 3-year period, you submit your application to the university as a GAP student, and you would be admitted. As long as everything is in good academic standing, then it should all fall into place.
And you've shared with me too that a question you often get from students that are considering coming into the GAP program: will people know that I'm a GAP student? You know, if I walk into a classroom, will there be some sort of way that the undergrad population knows that I'm coming in to UVM in a slightly different way?
Right. Yeah, that's actually a pretty big question, and the answer is no. There's no way that you're taking classes, as I said, you're taking classes with undergraduates, you're in a regular undergraduate course. We do not have separate classes for our students. Well, I shouldn't say that. We do have some variations, but there's not anything in there to say to identify you specifically as a GAP student. So you're walking around campus just like everybody else. When we're on campus, of course, this year is a little different, but the classes, if you enroll in one of the online classes, there are some that are specific for GAP students, but then there's a wealth of other classes that are online or remote that GAP students can take, and they're mixed in with the undergraduate population.
Thank you for sharing that information. And we mentioned a little bit earlier in the presentation that there is a cost savings. There is a 30% reduction off the standard tuition for guaranteed admission students that choose the GAP online program for this academic year. And you can see the difference here of the pricing. Kristen, can you just maybe share with us what we're seeing on this slide for students?
Sure. So non-degree students are not eligible for financial aid. Non-degree GAP students are not eligible for financial aid. So we were hoping to find other means to support students financially. So this is how the 30% discount for online classes came up. So students are charged tuition based on the amount of credits that you are registered. The chart below shows exactly how that lines up. So if you're taking between 1 and 11 credits, you get charged $683 per credit if you're Vermont, and then it goes down the line. And so the 30% tuition discount is reflected as well. And then once you get beyond the 12 credits, then you are pretty much just charged a lump sum, a tuition all lumped into one.
Right.
On top of that, there are fees, though, so that's not outlined here.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that, too. Are you finding that most students who are interested in the GAP program are choosing the online option for this year?
This year, absolutely. It's been a really great opportunity for out-of-state students who aren't ready to move up to Vermont to take advantage of UVM classes, to take advantage of the guaranteed admissions program. We do have a handful of students who are within Vermont. They just may not live in Chittenden County, so it makes it difficult to get to campus. So the online option has provided a really great opportunity for them too. So it's been a really it's a good option to give students, especially right now with COVID, as we're trying to prevent anyone from getting sick.
Absolutely, and such a great option for folks that are considering starting in the fall and are interested in the online option. That's an amazing reduction in tuition. So that's so wonderful that we're able to share that. I want to just touch base on and let the people know watching on YouTube, if you have any questions, please do let us know, because we're going to wrap up in a few minutes, but wanted to make sure that if there is something that you're curious about, we are happy to answer that. Can you walk me through, Kristen, the application process? So maybe a student listening today or a family member listening today thinks this is a really great option, but classes start in 3 weeks. Can we even do that for the fall? Can you walk us through, if somebody's inquiring, what would be that process for the fall, and or what are the other start dates as a potential?
Sure. So classes for the fall start August 31st, so it's closer than we think, but there's still time to get things in motion. The application is on our website. It's pretty straightforward. It shouldn't take too long to complete. Having transcripts, high school transcripts is really important. Unofficial, does not have to be official. I get screenshots. People take a picture of it on their iPhone and send it. However you can get that to us is very helpful, because we just have to make sure that there are some minimum entrance requirements that the university wants. And that being said, if you don't have it, we'll build that into a gap contract. So it all works out, but it's helpful to see that information, as well as if there's been any prior coursework at a college or institution, we want to see transcripts of that. Again, can be totally unofficial. We just want to get that, because we don't want people to repeat classes. We want to save you time and money. Don't take a history or intro to psych class if you've already taken intro to psych. There's no need to do it. As long as it's a transferable credit, we're not gonna make you retake it. So once all of that is submitted, I will review the application. It can take about a week, depending on things, to get everything in place, and to set up a meeting. But then once we get the meeting once we have our initial meeting, we can draw up a contract that day, or maybe you want to sit on it a little bit. But once the contract is drafted and signed, then it gets sent out. And really the routing process can be the longest portion, and that doesn't usually take very long either. I mean, it probably can take a week. So the whole process may be 2 weeks, but in that time, we can also get students registered for classes. So once the contract is in place, everything is good to go. So we don't have to delay. It's really the comfort level of the student. And it's a conversation that we'll have. So we'll make sure we hit upon everything in our conversation.
Yeah, and you touched upon, actually, I think that we can dive a little bit deeper into Liam's question, but you mentioned it actually in that response, which is great. When transferring to a degree program, will GAP students be able to transfer credits from previous university as well?
Yes, so the university will accept most credits that are C or better. Now, this all comes out of transfer admissions. I am not a transfer admissions person. I don't do a full evaluation of a transcript. But if you have coursework from another institution with a C or better, and it's something, like I said, that's pretty straightforward, then the university will typically give transfer credit for that.
Great, thank you. And that was a great question, Liam. We also have a question from Marissa. Do you have to transfer to an enrolled undergrad? Do you have, let me see if I can word that correctly. Do you have to transfer to an enrolled undergrad in the fall after you complete your GAP contract, or can it be any term? Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for asking that. So does it have to be the fall? Can you transfer at any term? What are you typically seeing?
So students can transfer to the university for fall or spring semester. Summer is the only term that we don't have. They don't have like an admit term. You can certainly take classes over the summer. You can start GAP over the summer. I didn't hit upon that in the last bit. Sorry, Nicole. You can start GAP in the fall, spring, or summer. It really just depends on the timing and when classes are being available for you. But if you finish your contract, say if you started this fall, you finish your contract in spring, and you just weren't ready to start full time in the fall, there's a couple of different options that we could discuss, whether you just continue to take classes as a GAP student and then submit an application for the spring, or you submit an application for the fall, and then once you gain admission, you talk to admissions about deferring. So there's a couple of different options, and I would certainly have a conversation with students around that.
Great. And that was a great question, Marissa. Thank you. We have another question from David. Can you begin the GAP program by starting off part-time, taking one class only, and then move into the program if this is something that makes the most sense for you to pursue.
Yes, absolutely. So if we would still have to go through the whole contract routing process to be set up as a GAP student, to be admitted as a GAP student. But if a student only is able to take one class this fall, that's fine, and then you could build upon that for the spring.
And a follow-up from Marissa asking if there's an expiration date once you've completed the GAP program. And is that 3-year window that you've spoken of?
Well, the 3-year is more that you have 3 years to complete your GAP courses. Again, this is a conversation. I'd have to dig deeper into the exact, what Marissa really is wanting to know. I think that applying to the university and then deferring for a year would probably make the most sense. So you can defer admission into the university. That would be a conversation with admissions. But I think that once you're done with GAP, I don't know if there's, a statute of limitations, if you will. So once you complete your GAP contract, if their expectation is whether you have to matriculate that year or if you can do it 5 years from then, that's a really good question. But I don't have a good answer for that one.
And that would be something, Marissa, please shoot us an email with some of those specific questions, and maybe Kristen can help to understand, what you're thinking, so that we can get you some more specific answers. We're happy to do that as well. David also has a follow-up question about the application deadline to begin this fall. And Kristen was just talking about, we don't necessarily have an application deadline, but it's just about 2 weeks or so that it would take to just route the process through, application process and contract. Do you want to maybe just go over that one more time as to what would happen in those 2 weeks in order to prep for the fall, and the fact that while that contract is kind of being routed around, you can still register for classes?
Right. So that's what I think, David, you're trying to understand is you can submit the application next week if you wanted to. We would get the student set up to be able to register for classes, so you could start classes on August 31st, even while a contract is being worked up. So we could route a contract 3 weeks into the semester. That's not a problem. It's just for students to be able to get the 30% discount for the online class, you have to already be considered a GAP student. So that really is the only part that ties you into any sort of a timeline, just for tuition and billing purposes. But so there's no real deadline. It's really just about timing, which can take up to 2 weeks or so. Again, you never know when you're going to hit somebody on vacation. So, one person who needs to review it and sign off may be away. But if you got something in this week, a meeting could be set up within a week and the contract done that day, and then it could be on its way.
And in the meantime, while the contract's on its way, you could be helping to find the courses.
Exactly. Still registering for a class. Yep.
Yeah. I've definitely heard from some GAP students the amazing feats that you pull off to get our students into the system in a really quick way. So if Kristen can do it, she will do it.
Yeah, it's a great team. We have a great team supporting these students. So we all do what we can.
Also just wondering, Kristen, in terms of the GAP Online with the 30% tuition reduction, would that still apply if somebody wanted to start in the spring semester?
Yes, that is my understanding. It's a crazy world, but yes, I think that the 30% discount, it started this fall. It's like we're saying it started this fall because this is the first time we've offered it. Right. So this is brand new to us for the fall semester, the online GAP program. I think it's going to show that it's successful, and we'll continue it on as long as we can.
Absolutely. And also new for our GAP students this fall is that Catamount enrichment community, really setting up our students for so much success and so much support as we know that we all need as we go into the fall, but definitely making sure that there's lots of resources available to our guaranteed admission students. Looks like our questions are kind of slowing down. I just wanted to put a plug out there if anyone else has any other questions. And Kelly also, I think, put our email address up. So if there is something specific that we didn't answer today or you want a little more clarification, please do reach out to us because we would be happy to do that for you. And we've talked a lot about applications, the process to get into the guaranteed admission program, the requirements to fulfill that contract and gain admission to the University of Vermont. And one of the things that we're just so hopeful that you take with you as a result of this webinar is the opportunity for that 30% tuition savings if you choose the GAP online option. And Kristen, maybe I'll just end with you work with so many different students from pre-college to our guaranteed admission program, and I feel like guaranteed admission students have a little bit more grit or a little bit more perseverance under their belt. What do you think makes our guaranteed admission students at UVM just really stand out for you?
Gosh, there's so many reasons why I feel like they stand out, but I think you're right, is that they're very driven. They've made a decision. They know what they want. They know what they need to do to achieve it. I think that that's really an appeal for GAP 2, is that it's very clear what you have to do. Applying to an undergraduate program right out of high school can feel a little ambiguous, there's so many different pieces that you have to submit. But for GAP, it's pretty clear. Once you get through the contract process, you have to finish your 18 credits, you have to be a good UVM citizen, you have to have the 2.8 minimum GPA. So it's eyes on the prize. I think the GAP students really come in with a good head on their shoulders and a good focus.
That's great, and you help them every step of the way, I have no doubt. Marissa just had a follow-up question. Do you offer any specific flexibility options for military students?
We try to be as flexible as possible. So, Marissa, it definitely would be a conversation. So I would say reach out, give some of your questions, a little bit more detail to what you want, or we can set up a time to talk so we can really answer these a little bit more in depth. But we try to be as flexible as possible. We know that everybody has things, life is still happening around us, but we still want you to meet your educational goal.
Absolutely. And I do know, Marissa, that our Veterans Affairs Office is incredibly active, incredibly supportive. And so that might be another connection that Kristen can help you, or your student, or I think you were asking for a friend as well, if that would be helpful. We'd be happy to do that too. So I think we're pretty good. I don't see any other questions coming in. I really wanted to thank Liam and Marissa and David for such great questions today, and hopefully we answered some questions maybe of people that didn't put any in the chat box. And if you do have anything additional, please do send us an email. There's lots of information about the Guaranteed Admission Program, the online options for the fall, and the enrichment community that we're launching this fall as well. So we look forward to seeing all of you at UVM in our Guaranteed Admission Program. Kristen, thank you so much, and we'll see everybody hopefully again soon. Take care.